Have you ever had to stand up for what you believe in, even though it was very unpopular? Have you ever found yourself in the position where everyone else is headed in that direction and you, for whatever reason, think the best, truest, rightest way is in the exact opposite direction? Well, believe it or not, there's a 2,300-year-old story in the Bible called the Book of Daniel, and the first chapter has something significant to say about that. It says that God actually favors people who follow what they truly believe to be right. And that's what we're talking about this week on the live show.
Kindred UMC live show features adults discussing adult topics, occasionally with adult language. It may not be suitable for young viewers. Please use discretion before watching.
Hello all, welcome once again to the Kindred UMC pre-recorded live show, coming to you not live, but pre-recorded from my front room, aka Kindred Studio A. My name is Chris Hayden. I am the pastor at Kindred UMC.
And I'm Danny, and I'm happy to be here.
I'm Delisa, and I was on a boat yesterday.
Cool. Both cool stories. Happy to be here and on a boat. Awesome. So we are beginning a new series in honor of Daniel.
There we go, yeah.
On the Book of Daniel.
I didn't write it.
That's going to ruin everything I prepared. Yeah. I just assumed because you had the same name that you were the writer of the...
A little bit before my time.
Of the...
couple of years.
2,500-year-old.
Yeah. A little bit before.
Okay, yeah. We're going to be looking at Daniel, which is it's actually like quite unclear. I don't know if it's a major prophet or minor prophet. If anybody knows, put it in the comments. It's kind of, the book itself is split up into a couple of different sections, and one is kind of like multiple stories about this hero Daniel, who's a Jewish hero who gets kind of not kidnapped, but kind of kidnapped out of Jerusalem and into Babylon. And then the second half is very apocalyptic. It's like visions and predictions on like secret knowledge, not secret knowledge, that's Gnostic Gospels, but like knowledge that's being like given to him by God so like we're going to focus on the first half because that's where the stories are. That's kind of what we're going to do for the next several weeks. And we're going to start where I think all good stories should start.
With our own stories. Oh, just kidding. With the Bible.
Well, now I feel dumb because that was a better answer.
Don't feel dumb.
No, we're going to start at the beginning,
okay.
Where I think all stories should start, at the beginning of the story. I'm also going to make sure, okay, yeah, I'm on silent. All right. I was a good phone boy. All right, here we go. So this is the Book of Daniel.
Chapter 1.
I know I put there we go. Chapter 1, verses 1 through 21, I believe. 1 through all of them. 21, I believe. And it sounds like this, and I'm going to read this from the NRSV, and I'm going to try and if you get lost, hang on, don't worry. We're going to go through it. I'll summarize it. We'll talk through it, okay? Because it's natural to kind of like zone out when people read scripture, and you're just like, I don't remember what you said. I wasn't even following. I couldn't even keep track of it. Like that just kind of happens. That's just the way it is. So we'll go over it. I'll read it and then we'll go over it. All right, here we go. And it's got a lot of hard names in it, so bear with me. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Jehoiakim of Judah, he was the Jewish king in Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. So Judah and Babylon are at war, and Nebuchadnezzar sieges Jerusalem. The Lord let, this is capital Lord, this is God, Yahweh. The Lord let King Jehoiakim of Judah fall into his powers, as well as some of the vessels of the house of God. These he brought to the land of Shinar and placed the vessels in a treasury of his gods. So Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon defeats Jerusalem, even though God's supposed to be on their side. And he like sacks the city and takes all their treasures.
Yes, I remember this one. VeggieTales.
Then the king commanded his palace master, Ashpenaz, to bring some of the Israelites of the royal family and of the nobility, young men without physical defect and handsome, versed in every branch of wisdom, endowed with knowledge and insight, and competent to serve in the king's palace. They were to be taught the literature and language of the Chaldeans. So Nebuchadnezzar conquers Jerusalem, steals their treasure, and then he also says, bring me the sons of all the important families. And they're going to serve in my throne room. They're going to be taught the way of the Babylonians, the language of the Chaldeans, and so we're going to make them Babylonian, essentially. The king assigned them a daily portion of royal rations of food and wine. This food and wine it's like meat and wine. They were to be educated for 3 years, so that at the end of the time they could be stationed in the king's court. Among them were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah from the tribe of Judah. I practiced those names, and I want credit for it. The palace master gave them other names. Daniel he called Belteshazzar. Hananiah he called Shadrach. Mishael he called Meshach. And Azariah he called Abednego. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the royal rations of food, meat, and wine. So he asked the palace master to allow him not to defile himself. So the rations that they're being given, Daniel's like, this doesn't line up with what I'm supposed to eat. I don't want that. Can I have something else? So he asked the palace master to allow him not to defile himself. And this is also religious implications. The food is not just like, what do you like to eat? What's good for you?
Yeah.
There's also religious devotion. Right. What God do you worship? What God are you loyal to? Implications with the food. Okay. So now God allowed Daniel to receive favor and compassion from the palace master. The palace master said to Daniel, I'm afraid of my lord the king. He has appointed your food and your drink. If he should see you in poorer condition than the other young men of your own age, you would endanger my head with the king. So he's like, the king told me to give you this. If I give you something else and you start to get like scrawny and sickly, they're going to have my head. Mm-hmm. And it's like, so just eat what you're given, man. Just come on. Don't make trouble for me, is essentially kind of what's going on. Excuse me. Then Daniel asked the guard whom the palace master had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servants for 10 days. Like, give us what we want for 10 days and let's just see, let us be given vegetables and to eat and water to drink. You can then compare our appearance with the appearance of the young men who eat the royal rations and deal with your servants according to what you observe. So he agreed to this. He agreed to this proposal and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, it was observed that they appeared better and fatter than all the young men who had been eating the royal rations, meat and wine. So the guard continued to withdraw their royal rations and the wine they were to drink, and gave them vegetables. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and skill and every aspect of literature and wisdom. Daniel also had insight into all visions and dreams. At the end of the time that the king had set for them to be brought in, the palace master brought them into the presence of Nebuchadnezzar, he's the king of Babylon, and the king spoke with them. And among them all, no one was found to compare with Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore, they were stationed in the king's court. So after following the diet that they were accustomed to and the diet that is akin to their faith, all of a sudden they rise to the top. And all of a sudden Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, is like, what's going on with these guys? These guys seem like they got it all together, And so it seems to be working. In every matter of wisdom and understanding concerning which the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. And Daniel continued there until the first year of King Cyrus. So, a fairly self-contained little story here in the first chapter. A couple of historical things. So first of all, before I get into historical context, what Like, what do you make of that? Do you have any questions about that? Do you have any observations about that? Like, what do you make of just what we just talked about?
From what I got from it was that the 4 guys who didn't want the meat and the wine, they trusted God to give them the knowledge and the strength to get by the process that they're going through and having to be trained to be Babylons or taught their ways. And then they rose to the top and were recognized by King Nebuchadnezzar.
Nebuchadnezzar.
Right? Yeah.
Nebuchadnezzar.
So it was
also,
God's
the
plan.
The hovercraft that Neo from the Matrix was on.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, pretty much just God was with them. God provided for their bodies, and I don't know.
Yeah, I agree.
That's an important. That is an important aspect of this. What do you make of the name changes, the renames? Either one of you.
I recognize it from VeggieTales. I know this story.
Shout out to VeggieTales.
Shout out
to VeggieTales.
Bob and Larry. That's their name. Meshach,
VeggieTales.
Reshach. No.
Meshach. Radshak.
Oh, Radshak, Meshach, and Abednego.
Yeah, Radshak,
Yeah.
Meshach, and It's actually Abednego.
Oh.
Yeah, everyone says Abednego, but it's Abednego. Just a little tip from me to you.
Maybe they wanted to change their names because they're wanting to change their beliefs. So they're like, you need to be more like a Babylonian.
So you're right on the right track. So particularly in this day and age, so this story takes place in about 650 BCE, but it was written in about like 3rd century BCE. So it was written hundreds of years after it actually took place. So the first thing, let's get out of the way. It's not like there was a stenographer in the king's court being like, and then he said this, and then he said this, and then he said, like, that's not this. This is more akin to historical fiction. It's reporting on true events, but it's hundreds of years later. And so the way that this, not to say that this didn't happen, but to tell us how to engage. The way that this story is told is deliberately chosen. The writer is trying to teach us something. One of the things is the king of Babylon is pulling royal children, important political children, from their families to serve in his court. Names matter a lot in this culture and at this time. They're not just names, they're like the essence of who you are. And he takes all of their Hebrew Jewish names and he gives them Babylonian names. This is an attempt to wipe out their culture, their faith, their religious affiliation. It's an attempt to just completely like disaffiliate them from who they actually are and make them Babylonian worshipers of the king Nebuchadnezzar, not worshipers of Yahweh.
Yeah, I was going to say it was stripping their identity of being Jewish and now completely separating it from their past.
And that was a tactic that Babylon used during war. When they conquered somebody, they tried to strip them of cultural identity by moving them and exporting them. And that's what happened to the diaspora. Look it up on Google. But that's a whole other thing for another day. So Daniel's act of rebellion, it's not just an act of cultural rebellion, it's an act of faith rebellion. Because the food, and there's scholars disagree on this, but one interpretation that could be happening is that there is some kind of an unspoken agreement that happens that if you eat the king's food, then you are entering into a covenant relationship with him. And that's one of the interpretations. And that Daniel's saying, no, I have a covenant with my one God and I will not betray that. So you test that. You go ahead and test my God, you know? So that's kind of the essence of what's going on in this story. So the thing I want to ask you guys is, when have you ever been in a position yourself or seen somebody else in a position where it was important to stand up for what's right, even though it wasn't it was unpopular, or it was like kind of like maybe even resented a little bit?
Yeah, for myself, I would say it goes back to working in the healthcare field and sometimes having to be a patient advocate in situations where not everyone agrees with your decision, or not everyone's always looking out for the best interests of the person, and it's uncomfortable. And I've been in many of those situations where sometimes someone can't speak for themselves, and you have to be that advocate for them.
Because they're literally unconscious or coding or something?
They cannot speak for themselves a lot of times.
But it's that rings a bell for me, because when my year as a chaplain, there were often times when doctors were very focused on the mechanics of it, like trying to keep the person alive,
right?
And not the humanity of it. It's like, hey man, this person's dead.
Yeah.
Like, can we bring the family in and give them a bedside moment? And
right.
And like the doctor was just like trying to keep the mechanics going, and I identify with like having to be the advocate for the hey, let's just all take a step back and take a look at what's really going on here.
And it can be uncomfortable because it's one of those situations where sometimes it's a room of people who do not agree with you.
Yeah, well, especially in a hospital, doctors and nurses who know exponentially more than I do about everything, and I'm trying to, hey, maybe I can maybe I have a suggestion that we might consider.
Right.
Yeah.
But aside from, the way I looked at it is all the knowledge you have at the end of the day, it's most important to be a patient advocate. It doesn't matter whether you're a doctor, nurse. Being a patient advocate is very important, and it's uncomfortable in a lot of situations because you go against the grain many times. But for me, that's experience that I have where it can be very unpopular, but
it's also really hard to know when.
Right.
Because sometimes unpopular, everyone else in the room is going like, nah, dude, you're on the wrong.
Right.
And how to know when to do that is hard. Because I imagine, I don't take this story too literally, but I think the lesson is very true and very real. And I find myself being like, what if I was in Daniel's situation? Like, I can imagine everyone else in the room being like, dude, just eat the meat, drink the water. Like, what are you doing? You're causing a ruckus for it. Like, you're gonna make it hard for us. Like, just go along with it. We already got defeated. God obviously doesn't like us anymore. Like, we're already in this screwed up situation. Can we just go get on with it?
Right. Yeah. It's not an easy decision to make, and sometimes you're not 100% right, but I think comes with time and experience. To know when is the right time to stand up, and when it's not popular.
How about you, Delisa?
For me, what I thought of, I'm sure I've stood up for people without knowing sometimes, but there's one time in business school, we had a lot of group projects, and I was in a group of all girls, and I'm pretty sure we had a deadline or something, was a week away for the presentation. We were meeting up, wanted to have all of our stuff individually ready to go. And then there was one girl in the group who was having a lot of at-home problems, like personal, traumatic life events that are happening, that I won't share. But the other girls in my group were just completely oblivious to that and what the heck? You're the only one not coming prepared and, blah, 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 ripping her a new one. And I stood up for her and was like, hey guys, let's give her a couple days. We still have a whole week. We were just being extra prepared, getting it ready by now. She has her stuff going on. Maybe we can help her in some way. So just unpopular opinion of they were upset that she didn't have work done. And I was just like, chill. Just take a minute. Not like you guys haven't had your work done before. So that's one thing I thought of.
Yeah, what do you make of, how do you know when to stand up and when to receive feedback from how can you tell when you're standing up for what's right versus you're in the wrong and everyone else is trying to get you to come on the right side of things?
I feel like I just know if I'm standing up for one person, I don't know how to, I can just sense the emotion or the sadness or the loneliness from the person that I need to stand up for, or from the whatever action it is, or statement at work about somebody's job position not being
I think that's
worth the amount of money or something, defending hey, they work so much.
Is it empathy that's driving you, or is it something else? Because if it's empathy for someone else, that's probably a good sign that you're on, like you're actually following the right side of things.
I would say so.
You know?
I think for me, in those situations, I think, what if this was me or my family, or, and you get that feeling like she was saying, where it's something just, it feels off, and you act on it, and it is empathy. You feel, I wouldn't want to be in this situation. I'd want somebody speaking up for me, and sometimes you got to be that person, especially when no one else in the room will be, so.
Yeah. And so these are the harder things. These are the harder things of faith. Like, so there's this great gift in particularly Christian faith, I believe. And we talked about it. We just did a whole session, a whole series on the graces, and we talked about justifying grace. There's this moment where the things that hold us down and the things that kind of like keep us captive, when we put our faith in this bigger grace than who we are through our faith in Christ Jesus, there is a real change and a real relief that occurs there. It's justifying grace. And it's a wonderful gift, and it's an amazing feeling. And that should be what then empowers us to be the spokesperson for what is good and true. It's cheap grace versus real grace, as what several theologians have talked about. Cheap grace is just this, all right, I'm into heaven, screw y'all, see you on the other side, whoa, and then just like gone, but I think a real true faith brings with it some responsibility to, if we receive a gift like that, a gift of grace and faith and justice, then we are best, we're living our best version of our lives when we then play that type of grace out on behalf of other people, even when it's expensive and even when it's unpopular. And the story of Daniel, especially the first chapter, tells us that ultimately, even though it is painful and costly, ultimately, that is the far better way to live and invest the time that we've been given here on this earth. So we're out of time. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.